Hello. We are venturing into Matthew 26 on our trip from Palm Sunday to Easter. And in Matthew 26, there's the account of Jesus with his disciples in an upper room. I'm going to invite you to get some elements ready: bread, cup, whatever you have that can symbolize the loving sacrifice made of Jesus, his body, his blood. And we'll partake of that when we get to that section. And so, Jesus had finished all these sayings. He had told parables and taught, and he said to his disciples, after 2 days, the Passover's coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. The chief priests and elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, Caiaphas, and they took counsel together to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said not during the feast, lest there be a tumult among the people. They wanted to be strategic and effective, getting rid of this troublemaker, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment. She poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw it, they were indignant and said, "Why this waste? This ointment could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus said, "Why do you trouble the woman? She's done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Jesus told him how it was, how gracious and generous this woman was. And he also was not putting down giving to the poor. That should be done every single day, and he had already spoken of that in ways in the scriptures do. Well, one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And then he sought an opportunity to betray Jesus. Now, on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And Jesus gave directions. They went and did as Jesus directed them and prepared the Passover. And when it was evening, he sat at table with the 12 disciples. And as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful, and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. And the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." And Jesus, who betrayed him, said, "Is it I, Master?" And he said, "You have said so." All human hearts need to be made better. By the grace of God, Judas' heart had become dark. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread. He blessed and broke it and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup, which was not a plastic disposable one. And when he had given thanks, he gave it to them and said, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I shall not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said, "You will all fall away because of me this night. It is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter declared, "I will never fall away." Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, this very night before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." So said all the disciples. Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go yonder and pray." He took with him Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled, and said, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." He went further and fell on his face and prayed, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." He came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for a second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass until I drink it, thy will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, and he left them a third time, saying the same words, and came back, and he said, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Behold, the hour is at hand. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." While he was still sleeping, or while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. The betrayer came up and said, "Hail, Master," and kissed him. And Jesus said, "Friend, why are you here?" And they came up and laid hands on him. One of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew a sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus said, "Put your sword back into place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I can't appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should Scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so?" For you see, as Jesus said, all this has taken place, that the Scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. We're to a dark point in this in Matthew, and it's getting darker. We're told how then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. Peter followed at a distance, and as he was in the courtyard, the chief priests and the whole council sought false testimony against Jesus. One of them, a couple of people said, that Jesus had said, "I'm able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days." And the high priest stood and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is this that these men testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. And then Jesus said, "You have said so," when he said, "I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you're the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said, "You have said so. But I tell you, hereafter you'll see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And the high priest tore his robes and said, "He's uttered blasphemy, and you've heard the blasphemy, and what's your judgment?" And they answered, "He deserves death." And they spat in his face and struck him. And some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a maid came up to him, and she said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all. He said, "I don't know what you mean." And he went out to the porch, and another maid saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath. "I do not know the man." And after a while the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you're one of them. Your accent betrays you." And then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the cock crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. This is the word of God. May it transform us. May it help us to realize the need of change in us and in humanity. God bless you.